Hello, interwebs. It's Aaron Poland with Spartan Claims. We're here for episode 2 of the Phalanx Report. Today we're going to be talking about what you do when you have a claim, or if you have a claim to even begin with. A couple of things to understand going into this is I would tell everybody just look at your policy. Everybody has one. If you don't have one, get a hold of your insurance agent. They have to provide you with a copy of the policy. A couple of things to go look through. You want to look in the sections for conditions. That's where you're going to find all your coverages, your losses insured, your losses not insured. You should probably know if you have what's called a broad peril policy or an open peril policy, named peril policy. All of these things are different things that you should look for. If you have an open peril policy, pretty much what it says is that you have a certain limited number of exclusions. Those will be clearly defined in the policy on what they do not cover. If you have a named peril policy, it'll name what is covered, and then it will also list specific exclusions. A couple examples of some covered perils under just about every policy: wind and hail. That's the big one. Almost every file that we touch has got some sort of wind or hail event to it. Generally when a catastrophe, hurricane, tornado, severe thunderstorm, straight line winds, derechos, even blizzards are going to fall under that wind peril. Of course, hail, those little frozen ice balls that fall from the sky, tear all kinds of stuff up. Those are always fun. Another peril that we talk about a lot is fire. A lot of fires go on. Fires almost always covered by insurance policies. There'd be very few exceptions that they're not covered, so keep that in mind. If you're going through a fire or you've been through a fire, just keep in mind it's going to be covered under your policy. Water gets kind of fun. There's a difference between groundwater, rainwater, water from a plumbing fixture. Almost no insurance companies cover flood. Flood and a backup of sewer and drain are completely different. Flood is any kind of surface water that comes in through an opening into the building through a window. If you have a basement or a tri-level and it comes in through the window, if it comes in underneath the door, that's not going to be covered under most insurance company policies. You would have to have a separate flood policy for that. The water that typically is covered is going to be leaking through the roof. If you leave a window open and it rains in the window, that's different than flood. Broken pipes, frozen pipes. For those of us here in the Midwest, it's January 30th. It's cold outside. Pipes are freezing and breaking. Ice dams are another big thing here. When the snow and ice builds up on the roof, starts to melt underneath it. Underneath the snow, it'll come down underneath, get stuck in the gutters that are full of ice, come up underneath the shingles, come inside the house. Wreaks all kinds of havoc on drywall, tears up your paint. It can do a lot of damage. I've seen a lot of ceilings collapse for ice dams, so those are typically covered under our policy. Backup of sewer and drain. If you have a basement, sump pump gets either overrun, fails, whatever. It's got to come up through the sump pit in the basement or through a drain in the basement. That is a completely different deal than flood. However, most insurance companies will offer a backup of sewer endorsement. You have to have the endorsement on your policy, or they're not going to cover the backup of sewer drain water loss. Vandalism. I mean, we can go on and on about what can and cannot be covered. Typically, a couple of things that are not going to be covered. We mentioned flood. That's the big one. Wear, tear, deterioration. You're not going to see that in a policy. They're not going to come right out and call it wear, tear, and deterioration. They'll call it latent defects, manufactured defects, improper installation. These are all things that the insurance companies like to shoot out denials for, and they'll just tell you it's not covered. Vandalism, it can be covered, but there are certain exceptions where it would not be covered. If you have a vacant property, a lot of times they'll exclude vandalism. So something happens to your house, you've consulted your policy, what do you do? The first and most important thing to go into any insurance claim is know your responsibilities under the policy and know your rights under the policy. You do have rights and responsibilities. One of the biggest responsibilities that is often overlooked by homeowners is you have a responsibility to mitigate the loss under the policy. So if your roof blows off, you got to tarp it. If you have a frozen pipe and it bursts, or you have a water line in your kitchen to a water supply line to ice maker and it explodes and you've got water going all over the place, you have to do something to keep that water from running through the entire house. Or, somebody comes in and sets the house on fire. Obviously, you need to call the fire department. You're not just going to let it burn until the insurance company decides to show up. When you're going through these, if you are not aware of your rights, you have to be careful, because the insurance companies are going to look for any and every reason they can to deny a claim. Do not give them the low-hanging fruit and make it easy for them. Educate yourself. Look through that policy that everyone throws away when they get it in the mail. After you mitigate your loss per the policy guidelines, I recommend you get in touch with somebody that specializes with insurance claims for a living. Call a public adjuster. That's what we are. We specialize in policy and covered losses. Call a storm restoration contractor that deals specifically with insurance losses. A lot of these guys, they're not public adjusters, they're not policy experts, but they've been around the block a few times. They understand the ins and outs of those policies. They're not allowed to legally give you any policy advice, but it helps having somebody around that kind of knows a little bit about what's going on when it comes to insurance claims. They at least know the process and can kind of go through the motions with you and hold your hand. If you call a PA or a storm contractor, most of these guys are going to come out and they're going to look at it, and they're going to let you know up front whether you even have a covered loss or not. I know public adjusters, we like to go out there and look at them. If it's not something that's covered under the policy, we're going to be pretty straightforward with you. I don't want to waste our time doing it. I'm not going to waste any of the support guys' time. Don't want to waste your time. Don't want to waste the insurance company's time. They've got better things to do than chase down claims that can be validated that are not covered under the policy. If it is covered, then we got something to talk about. At that point, we'll go ahead. Us, a public adjuster, will initiate our process, explain to you how we roll. Storm contractor is going to do pretty much the same thing. General contractor and fire, most of the time, they're going to specialize in doing fire losses. They're going to know what's going on. They're going to help hold your hand through that process as well. Once you've kind of assessed whether you have a claim or not, then you need to call your insurance company. You have got to call your insurance company. You have to notify them as soon as possible. That is a duties under the loss provision in your policy. If you wait forever, fire comes to the house, you decide a month and a half later, I probably should call the insurance company, that's going to come back to bite you. You need to call them and let them know that you've had a loss on them. I recommend, if you have a public adjuster, let them help you make that phone call. Sign the letter of representation that we all have to have. We have to have something in writing that gives us the authority to speak on your behalf to your insurance company. But once we have that, by all means, please let the PA make the phone call for you or with you on a speakerphone or on a three-way call or whatever. Do not commit to anything over the phone. Don't fall into the traps. They're going to try to get you to commit to what happened, when it happened, who was there, who knows about it, when did you find out about it. Be as vague as possible. You are a homeowner. You're a policyholder. You're not the expert in claims. Nobody expects you to be the expert in claims. Don't try to pretend to be the expert in the claim. Just say, hey, sitting in my living room, storm came through, next thing I know, it's raining inside my living room. Or down in the basement, next thing I know, I have 14 inches of water in there coming out through the sump pile. That's fine. You commit to those kind of things, but do not give them anything. Make them come out and inspect the loss. A lot of times the insurance companies will actually have you phone scope a loss. I'm not a big fan of phone scoping. Make them come out and send an adjuster to take a look at it. A lot of times it's just an easy out for them to deny coverage over the phone. I've worked in a call center before for a major insurance company, and that was the big thing that they pushed was see if you can phone scope it. If they refuse or you're unable to, then we'll go ahead and send a field adjuster out and actually get the field adjusters to do their job. So beware of the phone scope. It's a trap. Let's also talk a minute for the insurance company's trying to send a contractor out for you. The insurance companies are getting really bad about saying, hey, we'll send out one of our preferred contractors, or we'll send out one of our vendors. Number one, insurance companies do not have contractors. They are not licensed general contractors. They are literally just sending out people that are willing to do the work for the cheapest amount and in order to gain volume. I'm not a big fan of preferred contractors or preferred vendors. A lot of times they allow themselves to get beat up by the insurance company, kind of like dangling the carrot over the horse to make you go a little bit faster and gallop and go along and get along. Not a big fan. You don't have an opportunity to vet these folks out. You're literally just going off of what somebody working in a cubicle somewhere says is, hey, this is a good contractor, use this guy. Not a big fan of preferred contractors or preferred vendors. They tend to be more harmful to the industry than they are helpful to the policyholders. Pick your own contractor. You have a right. Almost every insurance company policy I've ever seen gives you, the policyholder, the right to select your own contractor. That is kind of starting to change a little bit. I know Florida's playing with it where they have a right to repair. Most of the other states in the country, I know Indiana specifically, the contractors are chosen by the policyholder. But make sure you're smart about it. Don't just go for the first smiley face you see walking on the block. Make sure they're reputable, licensed, insured. Out of town storm chasers are not necessarily a bad thing. These guys come in, they do roofs. I know a lot of good national companies come in, they've got their stuff together, they put on a hell of a product, and the policyholders are in a good place. Let social media be your friend. Social media, the internet, these are good things. Get on there and look at reviews. If you get on a Facebook page or you start looking at Google reviews and the contractor you're looking at, or even public adjusters, we're not immune to that either. You start looking at their reviews, and if they're 100% 5-star and they've got 50 or 60 ratings and they're all 5-star, it doesn't really pass the smell test for me. Nobody is infallible. Nobody is perfect. Somebody's going to screw up something. Just remember, every general contractor screws something up. Every single one of them. Anybody tells you they don't screw anything up is lying to you. Move on to the next guy. The difference is how they take care of it, how they handle their mistakes, and how they fix what they break. They all do it. The reputations will speak for themselves. If you look at Facebook or Google and you read reviews, say, oh, during the insurance restoration, they broke my window, but it's okay. They came right out and fixed it, made it all put back together, even replaced the next window right next to it just so it looked decent. So just keep that in mind. Be cognizant of that fact when you're going through there. So once you've got your contractor picked and you've fully vetted them out, then it's time to go ahead and get on the phone with the adjuster. Go ahead and schedule your inspection date and your time. I'm not going to lie to you. I've been an adjuster in the field for an insurance company. Things get busy. Particularly, we're at the end of January now. We're coming into February here in the Midwest. That's the tail end of February is when storm season starts hitting. From the last week or two of February all the way through really about November. The Ohio Valley here, that's our wind and hail season. It's rocking and rolling at those times. Massive hail event comes through. Don't be alarmed when the adjuster calls and says, yeah, 2.5 weeks out. Okay, they're busy. Number one, hail typically is not going to cause any immediate leaks. If it's just hail, your roof should be fine. If it does leak, keep an eye out for it. If you notice leaks, document it, monitor it. Again, go back to the first thing we talked about. You have an obligation to mitigate and prevent any further loss from happening. If it starts to leak, just get your roofer out there, your contractor out there to put tarp on. Always consult your public adjuster first. Well, we are not going to guide you in the wrong direction. So get the adjuster on there. They're going to get it scheduled. At that point, it's the wait game. You're going to sit around. You're going to wait for them to come out. And then that's when the fun happens. And we're going to talk about that in the next episode, which should be tomorrow. So for right now, that's the second one in the books. I Promise you I was going to try to keep these pretty short. This one's almost 15 minutes at this point, so we'll get them shorter, I promise you. But for now, that's all I got. I'll see y'all tomorrow, and we'll talk about what happens once the adjuster shows up. Thank you so much. This is Aaron Poland, Spartan Claims.
Spartans! What is your profession?